Was that a statement win for Arsenal today, James?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for a number of reasons. Firstly, obviously this sort of narrative around this team all season really, but particularly the last 2 or 3 months has been that they don't take their chances, they're not ruthless, they're not clinical enough in front of goal. And actually, the sort of 30, 40 minutes, even though they were ahead, it kind of looked like it might be one of those afternoons again because, Trossard had a shot brilliantly saved by Areola. Saka missed 2 really good chances. They were creating and they would only had that 1 goal lead. And when you think about what happened here last season, when they went 2-0 up, they were out of sight. West Ham were gone that day, and yet they made a mistake. They allowed them back into the game. They drew 2-2, and then ultimately, obviously, they ended up dropping points, which went on to cost them the league title. I think in those 2 contexts, this felt like a really powerful statement of just how far they're threatening to come this year.
Declan Rice against his old team was like a Rolls Royce today.
Yeah, I mean, that price is 105 million is starting to look cheaper and cheaper by the day, isn't it? I mean, this is the first game he's ever had 3 goal contributions in a single match. And, when we think about what we expected Declan Rice to give Arsenal, it was that extra solidity in midfield, that leadership, that presence, that authority in central areas. But what he's doing is far beyond that, really, because while he's providing all of that, he's also playing at times in a more advanced position. He didn't today, but he has played as an 8 more often than he's ever done in his career previously. He's provided goals in a way that we don't really associate with him. He scored the late winner at Luton. He scored an important goal against Chelsea. He also scored a late goal against Manchester United that secured victory at the Emirates Stadium in that game. And now he's on corners and free kicks. And this is another development. We saw him, I think he started taking corners against Palace in Arsenal's 5-0 win recently. Mm-hmm. But that was a new development that day. Now he's on corners again today. He provided the first goal for Arsenal for Saliba. And then he provided the free kick on the stroke of half-time that Gabriel nodded in. So all of these different facets to his game are really starting to emerge, and that's credit both to the coaching and the job that Mikel Arteta is doing in developing him, but also, of course, Declan Rice himself, who will have known that when he came back here, he was going to get a mixed reception. He's been back here already in the Carabao Cup when they lost, and he kind of knew that there was a section of the supporters who, despite the fact I think he's conducted himself brilliantly, really, in the way that he left. He lifted the club's first European trophy in 40 years and got them 100 million quid and then left, and he's been nothing but gracious in his public utterances about the club, and he even didn't celebrate his goal again today when he could have done, given the stick he's had. An absolutely all-action performance from one of the players who'll be in the running for all the individual awards, I think, come the end of the season.
Yeah, it's frightening with him and Bellingham and the rest in midfield for England in the summer. But let's not talk about that because we know Scotland are going to win the Euros. It's just when England get knocked out. You mentioned Declan Rice in that corner. Of course, you mentioned Declan Rice's corners. He got the first, he set up the assist for the first goal with Saliba. How about this for a stat? Take away penalties. Arsenal have scored 16 goals this season from set plays, free kicks, and corners. That's something they've worked on, and it really is paying dividends.
Yeah, credit to the set piece coach they brought in, Nicolas Jova. He was someone who I think they identified a pretty clear vulnerability. Arsenal, both defensively and offensively, actually, and their numbers have improved dramatically. They did have a bit of a wobble defensively around when they were losing games just either side of Christmas, that they were starting to concede goals from set pieces again. But that attacking threat has always been there. I mean, I have to say, they did try the same sort of corner on multiple occasions today in the first half, and West Ham just did not seem to pick up that overloading at the back post. That is a bit of a failing, and something you wouldn't necessarily associate with the David Moyes team. You think of Moyes' teams at his best as being very clever and do from set pieces. But yeah, it's become a major threat for Arsenal, and again, it's something that perhaps is emulating Manchester City a little bit, that we don't. I think that often gets underplayed. City are very good on set pieces as well, and we often think about the way they overwhelm teams and their attacking football and Haaland and all of that. But again, another thing where there's a sort of comparison between Guardiola and Arteta is this improvement and this consistent threat from set pieces. When they can't always play through a team, they've always got another angle and an avenue to hurt you.
Would it be fair to say, James, that certain Arsenal teams of the past, having beaten Liverpool by 3-1, might have struggled in this fixture? Is this the new Arsenal under Arteta, whereby banana skins are just cast aside?
Well, I think we can only answer that come, April, May, because they're threatening to answer that question with an emphatic yes. I mean, obviously, you feel today that the sort of snap reaction to that question would be yes, they are a different team, they're stronger. I think what's quite significant and is forming part of the piece that I'm in the middle of writing is what they're clever at using, and is the motivation of recent disappointments. So when they went to Nottingham Forest, that was a game where last season, the corresponding fixture, they lost the league that day. They were beaten 1-0. Forest stayed up. Arsenal couldn't win the league, and that hurt them. They also got knocked out of the FA Cup at the City Ground. It was one of the most sort of infamous scenes of the Amazon documentary, Arteta going bonkers at them in the changing room. I don't accept these standards. It was probably the angriest we saw him in that whole documentary. And afterwards, Arteta, when they went there the other week, he spoke about how the players had used that motivation of going to that venue. They talked about it a lot in the build-up to the game. I'm reminded of Newcastle. They went up there when they won 2-0 last season. They used the motivation when the year before, when they got knocked out of the Champions League right at the end of the season, one of the worst performances under Arteta. They talked about using that game as motivation to go there and win. And I wouldn't be surprised if Arteta talks about that again today, talked about the history of this particular fixture. They obviously lost the reverse game. I mean, West Ham haven't won a game since they beat Arsenal at the Emirates on, I think it was the 27th, just after Christmas. So I really feel that what they're very good at is harnessing those disappointments and channeling that into positivity, and really sort of charging and making sure that they maintain the levels. So when you talk about, the Liverpool, the Man City games, they kind of take care of themselves, the magnitude of the occasion, the fact that they're in the title race, all of those sorts of things. It's finding those little kernels of motivation in the more mundane games, if you like, to make sure that you maintain those levels of professionalism and consistency. And that's what I think they're getting very good at. I think during the documentary, you think about those moments with Arteta, with the light bulb and those sort of innovative team talks, who's trying to get everybody together. It feels as though the players are doing that more themselves this season. And I wouldn't be surprised if Declan Rice was absolutely at the forefront of that this week, given his history with the club. And obviously the fact that they lost here already in the Carabao Cup.
I'm going to end with West Ham in just a second, but Burnley, Brentford, Sheffield United, that's 3 of Arsenal's next 4. They've got Newcastle at home, Chelsea at home. They go to Man City at the end of March. It's not a bad run of games coming up short term for Arsenal, isn't it? And they don't have the FA Cup to worry about now that they've been knocked out. Just Champions League around the corner against Porto.
No, and that I think is a big factor. The Champions League, they obviously, they didn't balance it well previously, and they're going to have to do that this time. Porto's, with the greatest respect to that club, it's one of the kind of draws they could have got. But that said, the first leg is away. They don't want to leave themselves in a difficult position come the second game. But no, I mean, one thing I would say is that the squad does look quite thin when you look at the bench today. They didn't have that many players out. Arsenal, Gabriel Jesus, Smith Rowe apparently picked up a problem in training. But, if you go down the bench today, Nketiah, Cedric Suarez, Jorginho, Reece Nelson, El Neni, and then 3 of the kids out of the academy, there's not a lot there. Had this game gone south, had they been behind and they had to go and chase it, they don't have loads to call on. So I do think they need to be careful in the way that they manage the squad going forward. Really useful for them today to be able to bring off some of their key players for the final, 15, 20 minutes. But yeah, I mean, the fixture list is inviting. They're playing catch up to some extent. Obviously, they're a couple of points behind Liverpool. So, we are in a position where the margin for error is quite small, but the fixture list gives them a chance to really kick on and put themselves in a promising position for the latter stages of the running.
Yeah, I know you've got to get off to hear from Mikel Arteta. So last question, I want to make it about West Ham. They're still 8th in the table. They're through to the round of 16 in the Europa League, having won the Conference League last year. But that wasn't good. Do you think David Moyes will still be West Ham boss when they play their final game this season, whoever that is against?
Well, this is the eternal question about West Ham. I feel as though every time I come here, every game doubles up as a referendum on whether he should stay or not. You know, you can almost hear the fans talking about it in the stadium, and every time the pressure seems to build to a point of almost sort of critical mass where something has to change, they go and dig out a result, and everyone sort of says, actually, David Moyes is doing quite a good job here. And I think it's the nature of that middle part of the table that you only need to put a couple of wins together, and suddenly things, you know, you could be 7th or 8th or 9th versus sort of 14th, 15th. It's so concertinaed in that middle part of the table that you don't need to do too much to sort of put a positive view on things. But yeah, I mean, the worrying thing for Moyes today was the basics were missing, weren't they? I mean, it was they were, as I say, we talk about the set piece attacking threat, but you know they defended those particularly badly. They were second best in the tackle. There was a point, particularly in the final sort of 10 minutes of the first half, where they almost looked like they were giving up. And you know, there are certain basics that you expect of any team at this level, and they were falling well below that. And I suspect David Moyes will call that out to some extent, because if they play anything like that in the games ahead, then they're obviously going to struggle very badly. And David Moyes suddenly, again, will come under scrutiny. I noticed, you know, with the fans streaming out at half time, many more left after the hour mark. And then obviously when the 6th goal went in, you know, it's the sort of TV cuts the chairman in the stands sat slumped. It's those sort of things you think, yeah, it won't take much for them to turn. It wasn't, to be fair, it wasn't really mutinous in here today. I've been here when it's been far, far worse and far more hostile towards David Moyes. So we haven't quite reached that point again yet. But again, with West Ham, you never feel like it's too far away.